It is race day at Donington for the opening round of the British GT Championship. Morning, everybody, from a sunny Donington Park. The warm-up session has just burst into life. Cars making their way out on track after a fascinating qualifying session yesterday. We'll talk more about that in a moment, because what we thought we saw wasn't actually affecting the grid in quite the same way, with post-session exclusions. The sun has brought the fans out in good number already. We're not even at 10 o'clock in the morning yet, and yet Donington very busy indeed. The 2.5 mile Grand Prix circuit is in use, which is a great lap for the drivers. And a 2-hour race, a proper endurance race to get things underway. And you can see there's even a queue to get in, which is always a good sight for a promoter, that it's a popular day. David Addison and James Baldwin are trackside. James, a name familiar to those of you that have watched British GT. He's won in these cars in the real world. He has won in GT racing in esports. He's the world's fastest gamer. He's a gold medalist in the FIA Motorsport Games. And now a broadcaster. James, welcome aboard. And yesterday we had a good day watching qualifying.
We did indeed. Thanks for having me, David. It's an honour to be here. And yeah, Donington opening round. It's going to be a good day of racing. Warm up, obviously, everyone's going to get their eye in, check the cars are okay, check they're okay. A lot of the pros out at the minute, just setting a delta and a benchmark lap for the teammates. So yeah, should be good.
So yesterday's top GT3 time established, because it was the combined time, by that 42 Mercedes. Charles Dawson absolutely blitzed everybody in his qualifying session, and then Cian Dewis did a good job to put the car on the aggregated pole. You take the time of the two drivers. The Mahiki Lotuses had a rather mixed day. One was okay, 69. 88 had all sorts of electrical gremlins and didn't do a lap. And 84 was the fastest car in GT4 until the end of the session.
Yeah, and they fell foul of an infringement after qualifying, where the team, I guess by mistake, put the air jacks on, and that's not allowed because technically that breaches parc ferme conditions. So yeah, they got disqualified after taking pole, which is the worst possible outcome, really. You know, salt in the wounds, isn't it?
It is, and as James rightly says, it was this breach of parc ferme regulations. When the car is under parc ferme, immediately after the session, you can't touch it, and there was confusion, and the net result, the car goes to the back of the grid. I suppose the one solace is it's a 2-hour race. It's a longer race. More things can happen, possibly to buy you back some of those lost places.
Absolutely, and when you've got that pace, which they showed in quali, you can come back. You know, I remember when I raced here, one of the Mercedes GT3 cars spun on the opening lap, and they still won the race. So yeah, you can. It's such a long race, you know. So yeah.
Now this is 84. This is the car that was notionally the fastest in GT4 yesterday. It was offline, and I was wondering whether the smoke or dirt or dust or something from underneath was because it was offline or because it's got a problem, and it's not looking all that racy, is it?
No, he's offline, letting everyone through, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But I mean, this is, you know, it's only a short session, but it still gets you going for race day. You know, it's you don't have a lot of track time in real racing compared to sim racing, which is obviously what I'm used to, and you try and utilise and take advantage of every single minute on track. Especially in the morning, you can sort of blow away the cobwebs, get the muscle memory going, get your mind activated, because it's not a natural thing to drive a car this fast. Yeah.
Now there is 84, then down towards the Melbourne hairpin. The car in the hands at the moment of Aidan Neat. Let's go to the pit lane, say good morning to Bryn Lucas.
Good morning, David. Good morning, James. Well, listen, I've just been talking to Joe Osborne. You've just been talking about Mahiki Racing, and they've had their ups and downs this weekend. It was great to see them in pole position, but as you said, it was stripped away from them due to that parc ferme infringement. It was a sort of an oversight. They came into the pits at the end of that session with a minute or so to spare, in fact, yesterday, up on the air jacks, as James said, and they just didn't drop the car down in time, which is what caused them the issue. Car number 88, that of Ian Duggan and Joe Wheeler, has had a complete electrical restrip overnight, though. They've had this problem for the last couple of events, in fact, they've tested at and raced at over the time, and so it's had a complete restrip. So they're having a look now to see whether or not it's fixed the issue that's been ongoing.
Yeah, they got a hardship lap this morning as well, just one out and back lap, which was useful, because had the problem still been there, they'd have had another half an hour or so to work on it, rather than running the car now for the first time. Now, this warm-up session doesn't affect the grid in any way, unless you were to get a penalty, and therefore a grid drop might come of it. But in terms of lap time, it's not going to affect the grid. What, therefore, James, can you really achieve in a warm-up? You don't have to go out in it, granted, but what are the teams working through here as a process?
Yeah, I think it's two sides to it, really. You've got the car and the team aspect. You know, check there's no technical gremlins with the car, check everything feels okay, check that the setup feels half decent. You might even be on an old set of tyres, so you can't really gather too much as to what the pace is. And then from a driver's point of view, simply, as any athlete would, warm up. Get used to it. Driving a GT3 car, GT4 car is not a natural thing for the body to go through. So it's just getting used to that, and then you've obviously got 3 hours off, and then you're into the race start at 1 p.m.
Yeah, we tend to think about the teams warming up cars. You don't really think about the drivers, but you're right. These are big physical things, and if you're doing the second stint and you don't do the warm-up, you've had a lot of the day not doing anything at all before you get in the car and you have to deliver on your outlap.
Exactly, and you've had the whole evening off. You've had a full night's sleep. You get up in the morning. It's quite early. Obviously, it's just gone 9:30 a.m. So it just gets you going. It gets the blood pumping, and yeah.
Well, blood pumping at Mahiki Racing after yesterday. Number 69 comes into the pit lane. That's the car that Stephen Lake, the man behind Mahiki Racing, shares with Jack Mitchell, GT4 champion. There you've got 4 Cs, the two Cs Motorsport Mercedes running together. 18 currently being driven by Kevin Cher, the Hong Kong driver, and 42, Charles Dawson, who was the real gun in the first part of qualifying yesterday. New to GT3 racing, but okay, he's done quite a bit of testing, but he was driving a bit like a veteran yesterday.
He was, and if we're being honest, we anticipate with that pace advantage, 7/10 to P2 in that quali session, he should check out in the opening stint of the race, theoretically.
Theoretically, yes.
But today's a different day, race day, the traffic comes into it, obviously the multi-class aspect with the GT4s and the GT3s being on the same part of the same track, so anything can happen. I do suspect those opening few laps, if he can get through turn 1 in the lead, he should just be able to build that gap.
It's an interesting point you make, though, about lappery, because Charles last year in GT4 was the one being lapped. Now he's doing the lapping. Different art.
It's a lot easier. You're not in your mirrors every 5 seconds. So, yeah, much better being the quicker car, for sure.
But equally, you've got to know when to commit and when to hold back and when to force the issue past the slower car.
Ultimately, it's the job of the car behind to get through the car in front safely and responsibly. So you can't just dive bomb. Just because they're 10 seconds a lap slower, just doesn't mean you can't just dive bomb at every car at every given opportunity.
Talking GT4, number 30 Mercedes, that's the John Curry, Phil Keane entry. Number 90, Mark Warren and Jack Brown, which was quickest in Pro-Am yesterday and currently also tops GT4. Mark Warren, very, very good what you might term a shiny bronze, came out of Ginettas and Porsche racing into British GT last year. Number 30 Mercedes has Phil Keane at the wheel. He was quickest in his section of qualifying for GT4 yesterday, which in a sense was no real surprise.
No surprise at all, yeah. I mean, is he the most winningest driver in British GT history?
Jointly with Johnny Adam, yes.
Yeah,
yes,
so,
well,
can't expect anything less, really, even though it's a slower car than what he's used to. But, yeah, he'll definitely be a contender for today.
And so also when Stuart Hall is behind the wheel, will this MKH Racing Aston Martin be quick? Peter Montague is behind the wheel of it. Stuart Hall, 4th at Le Mans. Good few years ago, granted, but a quick driver, and his father, Peter Hall, of ICS fame, you might remember in saloon and touring car racing for ever and a day. So that's going to be one out of the new Endurance Cup as well. We haven't yet touched on this, but a number of cars not doing the entire GT4 season, but the 4 endurance races here, Silverstone, Spa and the second Donington visit, all constituting towards the Endurance Cup. It's an extra championship, if you like, open to GT4 cars. This is the Beach Dean Ice Cream Aston Martin. The redoubtable Andrew Howard shares this year with Tom Wood, and you've also got number 7 Aston in the hands of Giacomo Petrobelli and Johnny Adam. Johnny Adam is behind the wheel of 7 and Tom Wood behind the wheel of 97. Different Aston Martin teams, Beach Dean Racing and Blackthorn, but the same base car.
Yeah, and a good car because it won the 24 Hours of Spa last year, this Aston Martin, so clearly has form. And that's one thing today that's going to be really interesting is what car is hot and what's not. And I think quali didn't really show us too much. I suppose the Mercedes in GT3 looks strong, but there might be a few changes overnight. It's a different day, slightly different conditions. A bit cooler today as well, so some cars react to that better than other cars. So it will be interesting to see what cars are quick.
Yeah, a car that was not looking all that rapid yesterday, but he's good this morning, is Ollie Webb's number 24 McLaren that he shares with Andre Borodin. It's just done 2 absolute best sectors. You're looking at 78, which has got Alex Martin behind the wheel, the Barwell Lamborghini that he shares with Sandy Mitchell, Lamborghini factory driver, and that car currently 3rd in the time. Johnny Adam has gone top, so the other joint winningest driver in British GT. Really fired up for this season as well. Last year it was a bit of a late deal car, took a while to get on stream, but both Johnny and Giacomo Petrobelli, his co-driver, feeling really buoyant about this year. So also are Alex Martin and Sandy Mitchell. Sandy's not doing the entire season for various reasons. Patrick Kujala will sub for him, and he's a weapon, as we know. Charlie Robertson and Ravi Rami's GT4 BMW, another quick car. Almost everything you find, you can put a case for it being a competitive car or a possible race winner, can't you?
100%. Yeah, I think just go back to your point on Sandy Mitchell not doing all the rounds. I think a lot of drivers would be happy to see that. He's arguably the quickest driver on the grid at the minute. So yeah.
And Patrick Kujala's not slow, so be careful what you wish for other drivers.
Very true. Yeah. That Lamborghini squad's got some depth in. Yeah.
Rob Collard sitting out this round, possibly Silverstone as well for medical reasons. Rob get well soon. The defending champion, so he really does start the season on the back foot, but it'll be good to have Rob back. Now, 71, Charlie Robertson heads downhill. We've only got 3 minutes and change on the clock here.
Yeah, and I think this session, it's all about driving at 90%. The last thing you want to do is throw it off, because you'll be the arch enemy of the team at that point. You've only got 2 and a bit hours until the race starts, so you haven't got much time to repair any damage if you do sustain damage. I mean, in most of these warm-ups, we do see something, usually a spin, maybe a graze with a barrier, sometimes a crash, but that's rule number 1 with this warm-up. Just don't crash, and then everything else is a bonus, you know. If it feels good, great. If not, you still have a bit of time to debrief with video, with data, with the team to get the car sorted before the race.
Now, this is Morgan Tilbrook's Optimum McLaren coming down through the S's. Let's stay on board with him. We're heading to the Melbourne hairpin.
Yeah. On the left-hand side, going downhill, brake in a straight line. Be patient with the turning and trail off the brake. First gear, nice long first gear in the McLaren, actually. And then nice straight exit. Broke traction a little bit there, probably on a used set of tyres, so you won't have that much grip. Going down into first again for the final corner, outbrakes himself slightly, but does get back to the apex before a straight exit, and that's how you end a lap at Donington Park and how you start the next one.
Down towards Redgate, which is a right-hander that tightens the further round you go, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you can see the rubbered line isn't always on the traditional racing line that you might think is where you position the car, and it's more important in a GT car to be where the rubber is as opposed to where the theoretical racing line is. So that's the big difference from the sim to the real track, is wherever the rubber is, you need to make sure your 4 tyres are on that rubber, and it's not always conventional.
Got that huge number as well on the windscreen that identifies the car. Morgan Tilbrook sits on the opposite side. Is that a distraction, the big number on the windscreen?
Not really. The windscreen, you know, can usually be quite dirty and not the clearest thing to see. So on a day like this when the sun's quite low, it does make it quite hard to see out of the cockpit. So especially in the McLaren, you've got quite a narrow windscreen. It's like looking through a letterbox. Other cars are a bit easier in that sense.
Such as the Aston Martin. Johnny Adam, who is now down to second. Alex Martin has gone fastest. Shown as Alex still behind the wheel doing that time. Porsche number 66, though, we've not yet touched on, but that has another factory driver involvement. Nick Jones being joined by Sven Muller. And it's Sven Muller behind the wheel. First time we've had him in British GT. Brilliant to have him part of the championship this year. Sven Muller is another of those absolute stars in a Porsche. He will have to miss a round as well because it clashes with Spa and the Nürburgring 24 hours. He's committed to that. So Harry King will sub. So, you know, Nick Jones has got some really quick co-drivers to choose from this year.
Absolutely, yeah. Harry King is very quick, but just looking at the board here, seeing some track limit infringements. So I think the key areas for track limits at Donington will be the exit of T1, the exit of the old hairpin, the exit of McLean's T7, and the chicane. Obviously, you've got the tyre stacks to sort of stop you cutting that corner too much. So the 3 main areas, T1, old hairpin, and McLean's. And in the race, that's going to be key because they have sensors here. So if you do abuse track limits, there's no escaping it, really.
That's the Mark Smith, Martin Plowman McLaren that had an off yesterday in the pre-qualifying session. Did some mirror damage, also did some floor damage to the extent, even though it was, in quotes, only a trip through the gravel, it did so much damage to the floor that it's too big a job to do at the circuit. They can carry on racing, but the floor has damage and they can't fix that until they get the car back to the race shop and can really spend the time to do it. So they go into the race slightly compromised.
Yeah, and given that these GT3s have, you know, quite a lot of downforce working on them now, and the floor is a big part of that. If you have damage on the floor, you're going to just shed lap time. So not ideal that they can't replace that bit and fix it in time for the race. So if they are off the pace in the race, they have an excuse.
Yep.
Racing drivers love excuses. So
get them in early.
Exactly.
Yeah. So here you've got number 18, Maxi Goetz, Mercedes factory driver, 66, Sven Muller, Porsche factory driver. This could be quite a fight to savour come the race. Checkered flag's out, by the way. The session is at an end. So the fastest time of Alex Martin and Sandy Mitchell by just 0.2 of a second or so. Quickest at the end of that session. Let's head back to the pit lane as the session comes to an end. Bryn's been on his toes and he's in GT4 land.
Yeah, I certainly am indeed. I was talking to Chris Salkeld at the start of the session and talking about Brandon Templeton, and what they did was slightly different to a few of the other teams. They wanted to practice the race start. Because the car sits on the tarmac for a little while, the tyres start to cool down. So Brandon went out and did a slow out lap and then replicated the race start with a rolling start just to see what it was like going into turn 1 with relatively cold tyres. I also caught up with Kevin Say, and apparently it is a Say now, as we're going to go back to the old way of saying his surname. And I said to him, you've got to be feeling pretty confident with your lineup and your pace, and he said it's early days and gave that smile that he always gives. I feel there's confidence, but a nervous confidence here on race number 1 of the season.
Yeah, the talking stops about 12:45, doesn't it? Then we'll start to see who the gun combinations are. So let's have a quick look at our class winners, if you like, out of that warm-up session, because we have Pro-Am and Silver-Am across GT3, we've got Pro-Am and Silver in GT4, and we've got Pro-Am and Silvers in the Endurance Cup in GT4 as well. So you can see the different teams that came out with a top time in those divisions. This was the classification. Alex Martin and Sandy Mitchell's Lamborghini topping the times. Marcus Clutton going second at the end from Johnny Adam and then Sven Muller. Maxi Goetz was ahead of Cian Jewis and Charles Dawson. Cian Jewis in the car at the end. From then Sam Neary, Tom Wood, Jack Brown, Charlie Robertson with Jack Mitchell. And John Ingram, former Formula 3 racer, rounding out the top 12. The Jolt Racing McLaren going quite nicely this morning. Optimum's McLaren of Jack Brown and Mark Warren topping GT4 outright. And for Lamborghini's 78 entry from Barwell, Alex Martin and Sandy Mitchell topping the times in the GT3 element. So the warm-up done, and James Baldwin made the point you want to get through without any damage. They have all done so, so that means that the cars are all good to go. The race due to start at 12:45, so join us a little bit later in the day for what promises to be a really interesting opening round of 2025's British GT Championship.